we set up was done by AI. So it was kind of funny because I would put that through, and the amount of information that's out there on each one of us is just incredible nowadays. So I can actually put my information into AI and have it spit out a bio, and it was almost perfect with what I've done over the years and everything. It was kind of scary in a way. Anyway, as Nick said, hopefully you can see my screen. Quick thumbs up with everybody, I guess. Yeah, perfect. As Nick said, I am the new GPN president, also the director of enterprise IT. I have a slide here that I think that goes through the introductions. Let me see. So the agenda real quick, just talking about the rebrand. I mean, I know that's why a lot of you folks, I see some familiar faces and some, or at least names on the call. So I know there's a lot of people on the call and I'm really excited about it. This is a topic that I know a lot of you are interested in because we're trying to figure out what this means for the organization, how it's going to impact the chapters as well as the greater organization. And there was a lot of information that went into this decision. It wasn't something that we just decided over the last year or so. It took us 3 years to get where we are. But I'll go through a little bit of the introduction, why we rebranded the state of geospatial professions. So that was kind of one of the reasons why we really looked at this. So looking at the geospatial profession overall and seeing where the trend is and where we were going, and looking at where, you know, you don't want to ever lose your past, but you also want to look at how we address the future. And then talk about a little bit about chapter relations. We don't have a lot of information on what we're going to be doing. That's going to be something that we're focused on as a board. And my presidency as well is trying to regain the foothold of the chapters and really try to expand the collaboration and the communication between the chapters. I think I was president of the Rocky Mountain chapter for years, and it wasn't until I really got involved in the headquarters part of it on the board and through the committees, the various committees, that I did understand the value between what the organization in the international side offers to each one of the chapters. And so there's still a lot of gaps that need to be filled with that. And I think that's something that we're going to be focused on. The benefits of the rebrand. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then the next steps, and then have time for questions, hopefully. So you already know the John Nolte. I'm the GPN president, director of enterprise IT. I'm also part of the Rocky Mountain chapter. I was previous the treasurer just recently. I've been involved in the chapter since 2014. I've been involved in the GPN for, started in URISA back in, I think the first conference I ever went to was 1993. And then kind of went back and forth. And again, and I think this is one of the reasons why we really are having this conversation, is I didn't see the value in it back then. And so I started in it, was looking for a job, got involved in the network, saw what I was doing, met a few people, but I didn't continue on as I went through my career progression. It wasn't until 2014 that I saw the value in it again. And that's kind of the reason behind this rebrand. So going back to the history, and there's a lot of words on this slide, so I'm not going to read them all, but basically we started in the 60s, and it was much like the Esri UC. It started with a group of people that were just had a like interest and were really focused on the urban and regional planning side of things, and they wanted to look at how they could collaborate and have those conversations around that. And so they had a conference in 1963 at the University of Southern California, and then the first official conference was in 1967 in Garden City, New York. So if you remember, in Boise, Idaho, we had our 60th anniversary of the conference. And that was a little bit, because there wasn't really a specific exact date of the starting of URISA because we had the official conference, and then we had the charter established, the Constitution, and then we had our first official 1967, our first official conference. So those dates are a little bit fluid in those because we were established at that time. But again, we began as an organization focused on regional planning and information systems. So as you grow and evolve and change to these various different disciplines that you see in GIS, we started to look at how we could evolve and change and kind of capture those people that were outside of those information systems. We started the conversation in Baltimore, and it was it became, and if you're at the conference in Portland, it was a conversation that I think was brought up as it started as kind of a heated conversation, but it really wasn't. It was more of like we're sitting there talking about how we can rebrand. It was at the time that a GITA was looking at, and I think they've reestablished themselves, but I'm not sure if they're fully reestablished, but they were really looking at COVID had hit them hard. There was some issues with trying to gain membership. They had some difficulties, and they were looking at completely losing that organization. And I think they're trying to reestablish it at this point. But we wanted to look at that. We've been sitting at 2,000 plus members for the last 10 years. And how do we grow that? How do we capture the current state of the industry? How do we figure that out? And the reason that was heated was because, and I'll show a slide in a little bit, but the reason it was kind of heated, or kind of more of a, I'm not sure how to put it, but it was just a really good conversation. It was a very emotional conversation because it was looking at something like this that means so much to the organization shouldn't be just volunteer driven. And that was my conversation with it. I think I even mentioned that I was in the middle of the process of my MBA, and I had taken a marketing course before that. And so I used the comment that just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. And I know a little bit about marketing, but I knew that we weren't going to be able to do it just with what we had, and that we had to hire a consultant. So we looked at that, we spent a little bit of time, and that's one of the reasons why we took so long to do this, because we knew that process was going to be more difficult than just actually going into it and changing the name and coming up with a new idea. There was a whole bunch of ideas thrown around during that conversation, but we settled in on actually going to RFP. We formed, as Tim would know, we formed the Branding X Force, which was our task force within the URISA at the time, of course. But we wanted to make sure that we looked at it and took the approach, because we knew how it was going to impact the chapters, we knew how it was going to impact the committee, and we knew how it was going to impact the organization. So we didn't want to go into it blindly and just choose something that didn't accurately represent what we're doing, and look at the whole marketing perspective of it. So trying to actually look into all the different segmentation analysis, the competitive advantage, the competencies that we look at, those are all factored into that. And so we ended up hiring a consultant and did some surveys. We did some market analysis, segmentation analysis, as I mentioned, and looked at how, and I'll get into a little bit of detail with that too, but we looked at all of that information and established the value proposition. So why were we looking at rebranding? And I kind of went into a little bit of the detail with the reason behind it. And it was at the current time, it was Brent Jones, who was our president, and he had mentioned that he wanted to look at how we could bring others into this fold, into our network, and show what the strengths were. And so we knew we had a really good network. We knew we had a really good educational component with the GIS Leadership Academies. We knew that we rebranded the GIS Pro Conference not too long ago, and we looked at all those things as we were doing. And Brent Jones coming from the idea that we didn't really capture those folks that were kind of on the fringe of the GIS technology, but really were super important to that. So like the surveyors and the geodesists and those folks that didn't have necessarily a place at that time to have that collaboration between GIS and those disciplines. And that was one of the that kind of sparked that conversation. So we wanted to look at it and say, okay, what is URISA? What do we do with? Is it something that we knew we had a history, we knew we had the historic value of it, but did anybody actually know what URISA meant at the time and what it means to you individually? And we asked the question to a lot of people, and I know if you're again at Portland, where Tom was standing up in front of the crowd and asked the audience, what does URISA stand for, the acronym? And I think there was a few people that got it right, but the first one that mentioned it actually had it incorrect. And so that is really kind of going down to the simplistic terms of what we mean as GIS professionals, who we are as GIS professionals, and what is our competitive advantage. And so why are you a member of URISA? Why are you now a member of the GPN? What does it offer that other organizations don't? We know where there's competition. We have the GIS Pro. And again, when I started in 2014, going to the GIS Pro again, I didn't see the value in it because I came from the commercial side. I came from the private industry, and I was trying to figure out where I fit. And that was one of the areas that we still struggle with. And I think we're going to address that as well. But we've sent out the survey to previous members. We had a really kind of, it's pretty interesting to see how it all unfolded, but we had a bunch of different ideas around what we could come up with and build that value proposition. And that was what we settled in on. So um, the process that we looked at, and this is from my marketing class too, and this, I remember this is like a kind of a hand-drawn document that we're looking at. But the trends of this were kind of environmental scanning, the market segment analysis, the strategic development. So how do we build this into our strategy? So these are all parts of that process of looking at that rebrand. And this is reason why this is a very complicated process of looking at it. And we didn't want to go into it blindly, like I said. So we looked at trying to get a consultant that did this, and they did all these functional areas. They looked at the surveys. I don't know if everybody participated, but we sent out a survey to about 26,000 people that looked at, and that was current members, past members, and potential members that we sent it out to. We basically, anybody that had interacted with URISA in the past in some function, whether it was a workshop or the GIS Leadership Academy or coming to the conference that wasn't necessarily part of the organization or was part of the organization, we sent out a survey to. And so everybody had gathered that input. And then we've used that information to form out focus groups. And that was, so we went from that 26,000 person number to about 500 people. And that 500 people had input into the value proposition. And then we broke that down even further to about 50 people and had a Miro board that we had set up and looked at all the values and all the different areas that we were looking at. And we also coordinated quite a bit with some of the other functional areas. So we tried to have all of those peoples, and I know that some people may not have participated in the areas, but we tried to represent all of the chapters and the committees as well as the board in this decision, and really tried to capture that. The hard part is that there is you're only as good as the people that respond to those areas, and that was where we did really try to reach out and make sure that we captured all of those. So this is what we came up with, the value proposition. And again, for some of those people that had already seen this, it's the Geospatial Professional Network is a dynamic community of GIS professionals providing top-tier education, networking opportunities, and career development resources. Committed to upholding the highest ethical standards, the GPN empowers members to advance their career, support their organization, and shape the future of geospatial profession. And I feel like this really, we spent one of the days in Portland in the planning meeting coming up with this. And we sat down and tried to figure out, using all of the resources that we got from Niagara Designs, to come up with this idea, as well as the name. That was the value proposition, and the name all kind of came together over that one weekend in April of last year, trying to figure out how we identify the organization and how we identify what our competitive advantage is over other organizations. And this is really what we came up with. And I feel like that really does capture the importance of it. And so one of the areas that we looked at was who we are. And I remember early on in the conversations, we were trying to figure out the difference between people that we would represent, and how they're represented across the organization, and where they find value in the organization. And so these are just kind of that persona idea of looking at each individual member of the organization, and putting a persona to them. And so looking at GIS analysts, data scientists, programmer, geodesists, and surveyors, we wanted to see where we could capture those folks in that as well, and see what we offer. One of the first interactions that I had back in the day was talking to somebody that's an older, retired gentleman now, that was a surveyor, that saw the value in GIS and became a member of URISA at the time, and wrote a white paper of the how we collaborate with the survey profession in the GIS. And there isn't really that overlap in legality and things like that. We really want to make sure that we have that network that we can grow on. And that was one of these areas that I still think that we could be growing with and building out. And especially as we're looking at this new reference system coming up in the next year, and how we adapt it. And I'm speaking in a couple of weeks on that at GeoWeek here, talking about how we're going to utilize our networking capabilities to really focus on how we adopt that into our new technology. But again, it was the question was, how do we identify? Do we identify as GIS professionals, or are these users of GIS in their profession? So how do we split that and look at that as an approach to how they're identifying? Because there's a lot of people that use GIS that may not be considered GIS professionals in what they do. They might be environmental scientists, they may be watershed scientists. We have watershed scientists here that are heavily GIS users, but they didn't really have a space for the value, that they didn't see the value in joining an organization like URISA, because it wasn't applicable to the work that they were doing. They're more on that environmental side, the watershed side. They were part of the AWRA, the American Water Resources Association, and the GIS side of it. But how do we capture those people in this organization as well? And that was something that we really wanted to look at. So that was early on in the conversation. And again, looking at the future, trying to figure out, we've been in existence for 60 years. How do we get to that next level of the technology, the next group of people that are going to be joining this organization? And I know I threw out that number that we were 2,000 members, and we're okay with continuing to be 2,000 members, but we want to show value in what we give to those 2,000 members that are part of it. We'd love to grow, but we'd also understand that even if we don't grow, we still want to capture what the industry is doing, the trends in the industry. And we're looking at geospatial AI, data science, digital twin. There are other organizations that focus specifically on those areas, but how do we capture what our knowledge is on the GIS side or the geospatial side with that data science? How do we build that collaboration between that? All these different things that I attended Geospatial World a few weeks ago, and that was one of the biggest conversations, is how do we build that collaboration between all these, because these are all things that are affecting our industry. The cybersecurity, the advanced UAS, they all have their own disciplines, but they're all focusing on the geospatial side too. And then moving to this next step is building on this chapter relation. So this is the new brand that had input. It's not fully implemented yet, obviously, and still going to take some input from the chapters. But this is the brand that from the branding guide that they came up with for these particular chapters, being Texas one of them. And it's really important. And this is one of the areas, again, that especially with the rebrand, where the board's going to focus on, is building out that strategy on how we can build the collaboration between the chapters, the committees, the people that are volunteering for the information, for the groups that they're working in, and how do we show value to them, and especially with us, with the new name and the new ideas around that name. And I don't know why the slide takes two things to click, but I think there's something with the logo on the top. But So what are the benefits of the chapter? And these are the things that I kind of just pulled off of in the past. But again, for me, from the Rocky Mountain chapter, it's difficult. Other than being involved in the actual organization, it's difficult for me to represent what the headquarters benefits, how they benefit the chapters, because I'm always having that conversation, with, especially with members that are new to the chapter, the Rocky Mountain chapter, with what do we pay for? What is that value that we're paying for, and how does that trickle down into that chapters? And so these are kind of those things, but I put that question at the bottom because I really want to make sure that I look at it from your perspective. So the thing for me is we're connecting with that larger GIS GPN community. So we have a huge community, and one of the biggest things that I value in it is that. So I'll use Tim as an example. If there's something that I need, some advice, some career advice, when I was looking at my MBA, I posted it out into the GPN community and asked what should I be focusing on for my next step in my career? How do I get to that next level? And I had a ton of response from various people that were from Adam Carnow, from Tim, from other different people that um, posing those questions back to me. What do I want my career to look like? Those types of things get me on that. But that's the type of thing, even in the water community, I can go into different groups, and I can talk to people, and I can share resources and share knowledge and share that networking community. And so again, going back to that competitive advantage, what is that competitive advantage that we offer? The other thing that we're really starting to roll out too is the learning management system. So we're access to that learning management system. We are hoping that chapters will be able to utilize that as a resource. And one of the struggles that we found in the Rocky Mountain chapter was, how do we monetize what we offer on the local level, because we know that we're paying the membership into the larger organization, but we're not charging membership in the local level. And so how do we monetize and be able to pay for the resources that we need for our scholarships, for our community engagement, for our MAPI hours, those types of things? Do we go and just ask for sponsorships, or do we try to get some additional funding? And maybe there's a mechanism with the learning management system. And these are things that we're hoping that we're in the process of developing. So maybe there's access to the learning management system, that we can build that into the chapters, that we can use that for webinars and be able to monetize some of that. We know that there's other ways of building out those communities and development for those types of things, but that's other area. And then of course the discounts to the GLA. As a member, you do get discounts for that, but that doesn't necessarily represent the chapter. And then the GPN Connect and the mentoring. And there's a lot of also emerging professional resources. But this is another area that I think we really need to focus on too, is how do we build out those universities? I was in a conversation just a few weeks ago talking about the university and what we're looking at as far as what we're offering for career development, career advancement. When people are coming out, the emerging professionals coming out of the university, are they prepared for the jobs that we're offering? And I would say that in most cases they are, because we're looking at some of these. If your first job out of college, you need to know those basics, and we can teach the technology. But I think that we're also not necessarily communicating as a resource, even on the chapter level, of our expert knowledge to those universities. And that's another thing that I want to grow, is build out those communities that we can establish, where we can look at what they're teaching. There's a huge gap, and the conversation that I had was the gap was in the geodesists. So there's a huge gap in teaching geodesy. There's one program, I think, in the entire country in the university level that teaches it as a discipline. Um, but I think we're missing out on a lot of those technology and the resources that we have and the expert knowledge by not engaging with those areas. And I feel like on the chapter level, we can do a better job of that too. And especially with the Rocky Mountain chapter, we have 4 universities within driving distance of Denver that could easily be, uh, the experts in these areas, and we're not utilizing those types of resources. But really, that question at the bottom is, what else can we offer to the chapters? How do we grow this network and really look at that as a good approach? So the benefits of the rebrand, again, one of the reasons we looked at is and this kind of goes down to that chapter level, is a more recognizable name and branding. So now we're the Geospatial Professional Network instead of URISA. So we have that identity of being known as a geospatial organization as opposed to an information systems organization. And while we don't want to lose that history, we still want to build upon that. And so I feel like the trend in the industry is really going that way to more of that data science, more of that geospatial. We realize that the URISA name is no longer representative of the profession as a whole. Yes, there's still the urban and regional information systems, there's still the assessors, there's the different groups in government, but we wanted to look at how we can represent, because I think the offerings that we have, especially with the GIS Leadership Academy and some of the other educational opportunities and GIS Pro and all of the different resources that we have, I feel like there's a much wider audience that we could capture in that, instead of just the folks that are in the government areas or in the urban and regional information systems. And that was one of the main reasons, kind of that. And then we're really building on that momentum. So we've come up with this Geospatial Professional Network. We're building on what else can we do? We're going to start those communities. We've started one for the emerging professionals. We started one for utilities that I'm helping out to establish. And I believe there's another one for the small and local government one as well. And so those three areas are going to be starting them. But we wanted to build that idea of communities throughout the organization to really see how we can bring together common interests under the umbrella of that network. And so we can always talk about how they have the GIS professionals and the user of GIS, but how do we gain those areas of interest for those different people? Is there environmental science, data science, digital twin? Can we build these communities into that as well? But the next steps, we're going to be launching this brand standards guide, and that's kind of that one voice, one brand idea. We still want creativity with the chapters. We still want to be able to provide this, but we're also making sure that our consultants are providing those vital resources to the chapters so that they don't have to spend all this time and effort rebranding everything. We're really hoping that by building out these brands, we're going to be able to filter it down to the different chapters to be able to have them. And we know that's going to take a while. We know it's at least a year of change. And we're also willing to help in some other aspects of really focusing on how we can benefit those chapters that need the help and assistance with that. The other part of it too is to identify the tech stack. So as we went through this rebranding process, we looked at our tech stack and tried to figure out, what is the benefit that we're giving to the organization, especially on the chapter level? Do we have other resources that we can do through ArcGIS Online, through ArcGIS Hub, through some of these other things that we can use? Again, using a more consistent brand identity. My big thing is what I've been mentioning, is that communicating the benefits to the members and chapters really, that, as I said, that conversation that I had it was about a month ago, where one of my chapter members asked me, what is the benefit of being a member of the GPN? And I explained it, but I still struggled with that. I still struggled with showing those actual benefits that we offer. And I feel like that's something that's common. And so that's part of the board strategy that we're coming up with. That's part of that idea of where we go next with what I want to do as president, and build upon that too. And then, as I mentioned, building those communities, and then help the chapters with that outreach and brand development, looking at how we can, as an organization, really build those relationships and collaboration between the chapters and the other community partnerships and the other organizations that we have. That was one of the main sticking points that I understood. And this was people from ASPRS, there's people from NISJIC, there's people from all these different alphabet soup acronyms, but they've represented all these different groups. And this was at Geospatial World a couple of weeks ago. But how do we collaborate on a better level with all these organizations? Because we have the networks that we have established, and we have the ability to reach out to those networks. And that's one of the, as I said, the conversation about this new reference system is how do we utilize our network to build out those? And so looking at this new rebrand, can we build those relationships and not necessarily have to compete with others? Because again, we have the networks established. We just want to make sure that we're showing the value that we can do to compete with, not compete, but to collaborate with these other organizations. And that's another thing that we're focused on. And lastly, just kind of on the what does it mean to be a GPN member? Again, it's building those connections, providing the resources, connect with those other organizations, as I mentioned, using the existing technology, increase offerings through your membership, which is our GPN Connect, URISA Connect, formerly GPN Connect now. But we're also looking at building out our strategic plan. So trying to build out from the chapter level, getting input from the chapters. We just started this process, but we're trying to build out that and get input from the chapters. What can we offer? What else can we do? And then, as I mentioned, the building connections with the students and the universities, and then connect on that common subjects. That's that kind of that idea of that communities. And then lastly, talk just a little bit about coming to the GIS Pro in Denver. It's my hometown. I'm really excited about it. We finally did collaboration with GIS Pro in the Rockies. And so it's GIS in the Rockies is the organization that has been doing the conference here for years, and it's a fabulous organization. I've been part of helping out with that for many years. Past few I haven't, because I've been really focused on the GPN, but I'm super excited to have representation from GIS in the Rockies and the other organizations that are in this area, because the geospatial industry in Denver is really booming right now. And I feel like there's so many different ways that we can be collaborating and sharing resources, sharing that knowledge. And I'm really excited about that. And I think that is the end of my presentation, but gives about 20 some odd minutes for questions.
Yeah, that's great presentation. A lot of great information there. And I think that's definitely very valuable to have. The whole rebranding, I've, we talked about this with URISA Texas a while back when we kind of did our relogo and changing our website. And it's definitely a long process to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that we're trying to give the most value to our members. So my phone's all weird. There it is. But yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. And y'all got a little preview of potential URISA Texas, GPN Texas logo there. Hopefully we'll probably use that, some version of that, or I don't know if all the chapters have to stay with the same logo yet, but we'll figure all that stuff out. So let's take a look at some questions. There were a couple that came through. There was one point that was made by Liz that a lot of professors in the teaching world are not sharing any information about GPN or URISA because they just don't know about it, or maybe not involved in it. I myself, I do. I tell my students about it whenever I'm in class. I've gotten some great volunteers out of it already, so it's helpful. But if any of you guys are teachers or you're involved with students, please definitely share this. We want to have more reach with our students too, and bring in give them opportunities, give them a leg up like right away. It's a great boost to your career starting out, which is amazing. So we definitely want to share our experiences there. So that's a good point there. We had a question from Nathan. Says, I would love to hear more about the thinking around people that identify as geospatial professionals and people that use GIS as part of their job. So what's kind of the difference there? How did that affect the discussion on this kind of rebranding?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nathan. It was something that I didn't even think about. It was one of the one of the reasons we hired Niger Designs was because of and I don't know if some of the folks might have met Carmi at the Portland event, but he was a GIS professional before, and so he kind of had that knowledge of the organization and the profession in itself. And so it was kind of eye-opening to think about, but it makes sense, right? So there's folks that are GIS professionals, and so me, I would consider myself a GIS professional. And there's a lot of people that it's identity politics is kind of what we were talking about. It's a lot of people that identify in the way that I use GIS on a daily basis. It's pivotal to my job. It's what I do as my daily work. Because the first thing in the morning, I mean, not so much me anymore, but the first thing in the morning, I'd go in, I'd open GIS Pro, I'd go into my data sets, I'd start building out that type of project. But then there's a whole group of people that are actually doing the work in the field. They're the scientists, they're the watershed people for our group, they're the climate scientists, they're sustainability, they're people that use GIS on a regular basis. They use the tools and the decision-making process and the data, but they're not specifically identified as GIS professionals. And those are the areas that when we were talking about that, it kind of opened my eyes to that and said, yeah, there are a lot of people that aren't necessarily captured in URISA as being represented in URISA, and folks that we want to start looking at how we can, for one of the reasons that I was looking at the utility side is we have a whole bunch of people that are doing asset management that use GIS, but they're not necessarily represented by a specific organization. And so the utility community, I wanted to start something that we can use. It's a blog that we can talk specifically about how utilities are using GIS to empower the asset management side and what these decision things are that they're making and how we are making informed decisions. But it's not necessarily focused solely on people that are GIS professionals. And so there is that little gap that we still have to address. But I'm hoping that it's answering your question, but there's that whole group of people that use GIS as a tool for what they're supporting in their organization, but may not be. And I think that's also a larger conversation about job titles. When you're talking about the GIS job titles and really representing what you do as a job. Is it that I'm working in utilities? I'm a data scientist that's working in the asset management side, but I'm still identifying as a GIS technician or analyst or something like that. And so we wanted to kind of differentiate between that and be able to capture all of that in this new brand.
Hey, Nick.
Go ahead.
I wanted to kind of dovetail off of what John was just saying, because Ty had a question in there for us at URISA Texas, or GPN Texas now, saying, realizing that GPN is software agnostic, but how does our organization differentiate from SCOG, so South Central ARC Users Group? And I would say, realistically, if you're looking at John's presentation and what the mission of GPN actually is what differentiates us, because it's not only about being software agnostic, it is looking at how do we support each other and look at geospatial professionals as a profession. And that is everything from leadership training and mentorship to there is support for ethics. We have a standard of ethics. And then also all of the supporting materials that we put out as an organization. And then I know I'm missing some things, but I would just say realistically, GPN looks at geospatial as a 360 view of who we are as professionals, versus just honing in on your technical skills in a given discipline.
Very well said. Thank you. I was gonna address that one, but I think you said it better than I probably would have said it. So, yeah, your GPN and URISA, we definitely focus on a pretty broad, like everything GIS, everything that we can do to support in many, many different ways. Liz mentioned mentorship and leadership and all of these things that URISA and GPN provide. which are all amazing programs that we do. I participated in a lot of them. I know many of our members have participated. So there are so many great things. And that's not to say SCOG doesn't do a lot of great stuff too. They're pretty awesome as well. But we definitely try to do anything and everything we can to provide support and development for GIS professionals from the beginning to the middle to the late stages of their career and all the way in between. So thank you, Liz, for taking that one. Let's see, what else did we have? So does GPN or URISA Texas use social media besides Twitter? Yes, we do. That was answered. For those of you that didn't see it, we are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. GPN is on Blue Sky now. URISA Texas is not yet, but we probably will at some point move to that. We'll hopefully move to that at some point so we can make sure we cover all our bases. But currently, no, not URISA Texas is not on Blue Sky. And there is a link to the GPN Blue Sky account that Tim posted in the chat as well, if you look for that. What else do we have? There was another good thread. There's not so much a question for John, but a question kind of in general. Does anyone have any advice for aspiring GIS professionals with little hands-on experience with GIS, things like education, certifications, entry roles, any other advice? And there was a lot of feedback came through that thread, so definitely look for that one. That was a question from Chris McGovern. So many different resources again there. GLA, the Geospatial Leadership Academy that URISA and the GPN provides, is an amazing program. I have participated in that. Some of our participants here, Liz and Tim, have been instructors at that. Great experiences there. Mentorship. Get a mentor. If you're coming into the GIS world, get a mentor. Go through the URISA, the GPN's mentorship program. Another fantastic program.
And Nick, I want to jump in there too and say, going back to the thing about being a student, if you can join while you are a student, you get a very discounted rate. It's super affordable. I would say absolutely join, take advantage of all your resources. Post-student, even if you are not a member of GPN, you can apply to participate in the mentorship program. And there are something like 2 to 3 cohorts a year. And I believe, John, that's run by the Vanguard cabinet, right? Yeah. So the Vanguard cabinet is another way in GPN to get involved. It's for young professionals who are emerging leaders. And so they run the mentorship program. So there have been plenty of people who've joined the mentorship program. I think it runs for about 6 months per cohort, something like that. And you don't have to have a paid membership to be part of that. So if you're getting started, I would say definitely apply. And if you have experience in the field, that's a wonderful way to give back and share everything that you have gone through and wish you had known starting out in your career with others.
Yeah, that's do. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say that just piggybacking off of that, the mentor program, the mentor-mentee program is amazing. It's I've been part of it for the last well, I think since the start of it, and it is run by the Vanguard, but it's not necessarily young members or emergent professionals. It's people that just need career advice, and so I mentored someone that was moving up into the GIS manager role and had a lot of questions about what the expectations were. What do you need to do? And being I'm also GLA instructor too, and being on that part of it and understanding the management side, there's a lot of things that people are really worried to get from that GIS technician side to the management side, and not necessarily, I've known people that have done that and like, I'd rather just be behind the computer doing the work. I don't want to actually do the management side. And we give the resources. So the GLA gives the resources for that, but also just on becoming that leader in your industry in that area. But also the mentor side, having the conversations and being able to at least get advice from people. I mean, I know if I wish back in the day when I was moving up through my career that I had that. I found mentors in other areas, but I wish I had somebody that I could ask the different advice when you're getting into those different roles, and what the expectations are and how to deal with certain situations. And it's kind of a nice situation. It's a great resource that we have.
It absolutely is. And in fact, I just linked the Mentor Network website in the chat. There was a question about that, so check it out in there. They are the sign up. I think I don't know which cohort is going on right now, but there should be accepting signups right now, I think.
And I see another comment in there about asking your employer to support you, and like you know, how do we advocate for the value add? So I think maybe, John, that could be and Tim, this could be a takeaway for and Sarah, I know Sarah's on the call too, for GPN parent org to look at. For example, like Esri, when they have conferences, they have like a nice template for like arguing your justification letter for getting funding for your conference. Maybe that would be something we could put together as an organization. Like, what is the value add? What's a justification for folks to turn into their employers for support, for either paying for membership or even paying for a GIS conference?
Yep, that is correct. As Tim has pointed out, the next cohort starts February 15th, so you still have time to sign up and get involved. Again, it's a great resource that you know, the VC and GPN provide to us. So I've been a mentor a couple times. I've still got a few that I connect with, and I've taken a lot of the way to mentor some of my students too. So it's highly valuable if you want to share your experience, for those of you that are managers that have been in this job for 20, 30 years or however long. And then for those of you just starting out, you know, definitely connect with people, connect on LinkedIn, connect to this network. It's a huge network. Personally, I think one of the biggest benefits of being part of the GPN, being part of URISA Texas, is the network. You meet so many great people. It is that networking, and John, I'm sure you can talk to this too. That networking aspect is so invaluable in this career, and you meet people from all over the world doing this job and just being involved in this community. So, John, do you have any experiences kind of like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say some of my uh, best friends are in the organization now that I've met through these different programs. You know, some of the people that I talk to, and again, that career advice, it's the next level of getting to this. And even just going from, I asked a few people when I was talking about going from the GIS manager to the director of IT, because that's a huge step. I'm not necessarily leaving GIS behind, but I was definitely concerned with, you know, where my passion was at the time. And you know, granted, it wasn't kind of a career progression for me, and I looked at it, but I did rely on some of the people that I knew in the organization to throw out some ideas and what to, you know, look at and things like that. And also just even, I think years ago when I was looking at some of the utility network work that we were doing, I reached out to some of the folks in the GPN to figure out what their resources are. And I know that I've utilized some of the resources and even some of the contracts, some of the vendors that we had that were working in this, that were part of the GPN. I've used them in the various areas that I've been working in too. And so that kind of gives you that whole approach to being able to build that network. And that's so valuable in your career.
I heard somebody say, it was just a few months ago on some sort of URISA or GPN. It might have been at a Mappy Hour or a webinar after, you know, conversation like this, where after their first job, every single job they had gotten in their GIS career came from this network. And they, you know, every lead that they had ever gotten or recommendation came just from the network. So that's pretty powerful. And I think, and I tell people this all the time, there are some industries that are very cutthroat and they hoard information. And I think that the GPN is so super special because we all just, as I don't know, it's embodied in our spirit, is that sharing information is how we are. Sharing is caring. Like, we want our peers to be successful, and it's not a me versus you all the time. It is, we want to disseminate information, we want to support each other and lift each other up. So you know, people are very generous with their time, their advice, their knowledge. It's just fantastic, invaluable.
Yeah, we had a career night, the Rocky Mountain chapter, 4 or 5 years ago. And I remember sitting there, and there was a student that had reached out to me previously and asked me about work, and they were just graduating. And I was sitting in this, Rocky Mountain chapter career night, and I said to the student, I said, well, this company is hiring. Why don't you go talk to them? And 3 weeks later, they were working for that company. And that was the kind of, I felt so good, but I didn't really, all I did was facilitate the greeting. I didn't really do anything with that, but they were so grateful for having that network to be able to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of my current roles, I think were partially due to some networking in some way. So either going to an event or talking to somebody or just knowing somebody and being introduced to it. That's how I got involved in URISA, Texas. Is just connected with somebody who I had never met before, and eventually they invited me to join this organization I never heard of, URISA, Texas. I said, sure, why not? I'll give it a try, and I'm now in charge of it. So. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. You never know where you're going to go, but like Liz was saying, like John was saying, we love to share information. We love to share within this community. So super amazing. We got about a minute or so here. We had a couple of comments come through already praising the rebrand. People who weren't sure about URISA before, they didn't think it was for them, but it's been a great resource. So that's amazing. This comment I like, thinking the rebrand is going to lead to growth also, and seeing new groups being developed in GPN. That's also amazing. And just being able to see the value, having these kinds of events too, these speaker series that we do here, and having John join us. Again, that's the value. People tune in, people see this stuff, people want to see this stuff and know more about it and just be more involved. Have any other? There was one question. We have time for one last question. I'm not sure how to answer this one. Is there an ethics comparison between OGC ethics guidelines versus GIS AI, or guidelines on how to navigate developing AI skills and maintain ethical practices? I'm not sure if we can answer that one. That's kind of a tough one.
No, but I'll give you, and I can't think of the person's name too, but based out of Arizona, there was a woman that I just spoke with a couple of weeks ago about AI ethics, and she helped design the city program for Arizona, for the city in Arizona. And I want to say it was Tucson, but I can't remember if that's specific, but I can gather that information if somebody wants to reach out to me. I can put them in touch. It was a fabulous conversation with this person too, and talking about they did geospatial work too, but also on the AI side. So really helpful and understanding the ethics of it.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, that'll be great to hear. I mean, AI is definitely a hot topic these days. So the more we know about it, the more we can understand it, probably the better for all of us. I think that's it for questions. I don't see anything else. So again, John, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for presenting. I know that there was a lot of people were excited to see this and kind of understand more about the rebranding. I'm certainly excited to know a little bit more about the rebranding efforts and how that's going to affect us coming down the line. I'm looking forward to URISA Texas kind of joining that and eventually becoming the GPN of Texas, or GPN Texas, however we decide to call it. But yeah, thanks everybody else for joining us today. Really glad to see everybody here, and we will check you guys out next week or next month at the end of February.
Thanks, everyone.